Hi, this is Eric Keller for Otoy. In this video, we're going to give you a brief introduction to the Octane Standalone interface. The interface itself is divided into four major areas. We have the viewer up here, which allows us to see our render in progress. We have the node graph down here, which shows you how all the nodes that make up the scene are connected. We have the node inspector, which allows you to edit the attributes of each of the nodes. And we have the scene outliner, which shows you all the nodes in the scene in the form of a hierarchy. We also have a couple tabs here that allow you to access the live database. Live database contains a number of nodes that are shared between Octane users online. So you must be connected to the internet in order to use the live DB. And we have a local database which allows you to save nodes that you want to use between different Octane scenes on your hard drive. To navigate the node editor, you can hold the middle mouse button and drag. And if you want to zoom in, you can use the scroll wheel on your mouse. If you want to change the way that you navigate within the Octane interface, you can go up to the File menu and choose Preferences, and you'll find under Controls, you can change the way that you navigate within the interface itself. So let's take a look at a blank scene in Octane Standalone, and I'll show you how you can quickly import some geometry and take a look at it within the render view. Let's go back to the scene editor here, and I'll bring in some geometry. To do this, I'm going to right-click over the node graph and choose Geometry Mesh. This will bring up a file dialog, and I can use this to find the mesh that I want. Meshes are typically exported from other programs in formats such as OBJ. So let's bring in the Octane Crystal logo object. So I'll click on this and then choose Open. This will bring up a file dialog which will allow me to set my options. So for example, I might want to set the subdivision level of the object to 1. This means that the object will be subdivided one time. In addition, we also have scene units and other options such as bringing in materials that were created in other programs. I'll choose OK, and we'll see that a node appears here on the node graph. We don't see anything in the viewer yet. I'm going to right click and choose from the menu Render Target. This is the output for the objects in the file. And now I'll make a connection between this geometry object and the render target. If I click on the circle and drag out a wire, I can connect it to one of the circles that is on the render target. You'll notice that it's snapping to the most appropriate input for the render target. These are also color-coded to make it easier to see what's going on. When I let go, the connection has been made. And now I can scroll in my scene and see if I can find my object. To navigate in the viewer window, hold the Alt key and left mouse button drag to orbit the view, hold the Alt key and middle mouse button drag to pan the view, and hold the Alt key and right mouse drag to zoom in or out. Now it's looking a little bit fuzzy because we have kind of a default aperture on the camera. We can fix this by adding a camera to our scene. I'm going to right click in the node graph editor, and for cameras I'll choose Thin Lens Camera. That's a typical camera used for rendering a scene. This brings in yet another node, which has a large number of inputs, and I can connect this to my input. I'll connect it to the camera input on my render target. Now I'm actually looking at the scene through this camera. When I double click on the node, you can see all the settings appear here in the node inspector. I'm going to set the aperture down to 0 so that we don't have any kind of depth of field blurring. And then I'm going to zoom out by holding the Alt key and right-click dragging in the scene. So you see my object here, and you can see it's kind of in a white environment. So I'll add a couple other items to the scene in order to make it a little bit clearer what's going on. Let's add an environment node so we have some better lighting in the scene. I'm going to right-click, and from the menu I'll choose Environments, and let's choose Daylight Environment. I'll move the nodes aside in the node graph and connect the daylight environment to this input right here. We can see now the lighting changes to represent an outdoor lighting scenario. Also notice in the node inspector, when daylight environment is selected, we have a number of options for changing the lighting, including a map which I can drag on so the lighting matches what we would see if we were in this part of the world at this particular time. So I'm in Los Angeles, so I'll click somewhere close to California. I can also go down within the node inspector and change things such as the local time, and the month and the day, as well as longitude and latitude. And you notice when I drag on the longitude and latitude, my cursor moves within the map. As I rotate around in the scene, you can see there's the sun right there. Let's add some additional geometry to the scene. Again, I'm going to right click, and from geometry, I'll choose mesh. This will bring up my dialog box again. Let's choose the small crystals object. I'll leave these at the default setting. Don't see it in the scene just yet. I'm going to right click again, choose geometry, mesh, and this time I'll choose crystal base. So now I have 3 objects within the scene, but I'm only seeing one. I need to connect these other objects to the geometry input of the render target, but you can see there's already a wire connecting this one object. So in order to do this, I will create a group and I will connect all these objects to the group node. So I'll right click, choose geometry, and then choose group. This brings in a new node. Now I can connect a wire to this input right here and then connect this to the same input. I'll connect my small crystals to the second input, and after the scene compiles, we'll see the small crystals appear within the viewer. And there they are. Let's just move the view a little bit here. Also get the Octane logo facing the right way. Now I'd like to add the crystal base, but in order to do this I need to add an input to my geometry group. So with the geometry group node selected, I'll go into the node inspector and choose add input. Now I have a new circle in here and I can connect my wire. After the scene compiles, which you can see right here, we'll see that crystal base geometry appear in the scene. And here it is. That's the basics of working within the Octane standalone interface. I think you'll find that after working with it for a little bit, it is a very powerful tool for creating extremely realistic and beautiful renders quickly.